You turn a handle. Water comes out. Clear, cold, drinkable in under 2 seconds. You don't check it. You don't smell it. You don't wonder what's living in it. That single act, trusting a tap, is less than 150 years old for most of the world. For 300,000 years before that, every sip of water was a calculated risk. Here's the disruption. In parts of the world without modern sanitation, contaminated water still kills more people every year than war. The World Health Organization estimates over 500,000 people die annually from diarrheal disease linked to unsafe water. Multiply that across the entire span of human history, and you start to see the real number. A number so large it's almost impossible to process. Your ancestors weren't just thirsty. They were gambling with pathogens every single day, with no idea what a pathogen even was. This is going to change the way you think about the most boring object in your kitchen. Because the story of clean water isn't a story about plumbing. It's a story about instinct, chemistry, and a series of accidental discoveries that kept the human species alive long enough to invent the tap in the first place. Start at the source, literally. Around 1.8 million years ago, near Lake Turkana in modern Kenya, early Homo erectus set up camp within a few hundred meters of open water. Researchers working the site, including paleoanthropologist Richard Leakey's teams in the 1970s and 80s, found stone tools clustered almost exclusively along ancient lake and river margins, not randomly scattered, concentrated. That's not a coincidence. It's a trade-off. Open water in the Rift Valley meant crocodiles. It meant hippos, which kill more people in modern Africa than any other large animal. It meant standing water thick with bacteria, parasites, and waste from every other animal drinking at the same spot. But it also meant survival. Anthropologist Peter Ungar's research on early hominin diet and hydration shows that a human body loses roughly 2 to 3 liters of water a day just through basic function: sweat, breath, waste. Without consistent access, dehydration kills faster than starvation, within days, not weeks. So the calculation was brutal and constant. Risk the predator, risk the parasite, or die of thirst by Tuesday. For nearly 2 million years, that was the entire negotiation. Camp near danger, or don't camp at all. But somewhere in that timeline, something shifted. Humans stopped just tolerating dirty water. They started changing it. And the first clue isn't a filter, it's not a well. It's a drink you've probably had this week. And its origin is far stranger than anyone expected. In 2018, a team led by Stanford archaeologist Li Liu examined residue inside stone mortars from Raqefet Cave near Haifa, Israel. The mortars were 13,000 years old. What she found wasn't food residue. It was beer. Not beer for celebration, beer for survival. The fermentation process, even in its crudest form, did something early humans couldn't have understood chemically, but clearly understood practically. Fermenting grain drops the pH and produces alcohol, both of which kill many of the bacteria responsible for waterborne disease. A liquid that started as risky became, through accident and repetition, safer than the water it was made from. This wasn't isolated. Similar residues have turned up at sites in China dating back over 9,000 years, examined by University of Pennsylvania biomolecular archaeologist Patrick McGovern. Different continents, different grain, same solution. Arrived at independently. Humans hadn't discovered brewing for pleasure. They'd stumbled onto one of the first water treatment technologies on Earth, and it would take another 13 millennia before anyone understood why it worked. But fermentation only solved part of the problem. It required grain, time, and containers. It didn't help you on the move, and it didn't help you drink straight from a river without getting sick first. That's where fire comes in. At the Xianrendong Cave site in Jiangxi Province, China, archaeologists dated pottery fragments to roughly 20,000 years ago. Among the oldest ceramic vessels ever found, published in a landmark 2012 study in the journal Science. For years, researchers assumed pottery was invented for storage, but residue analysis told a different story. These vessels showed scorch marks consistent with direct heat exposure. Repeated heat exposure, water, boiled over and over. Boiling water to roughly 70 degrees Celsius for even a few minutes kills the vast majority of pathogens. E. coli, cholera bacteria, Giardia. Ice Age humans in China didn't know a single one of those names, but they knew that water treated with fire made people sick less often than water taken straight from a stream. Here's where it gets stranger. This knowledge wasn't universal. It wasn't written down, obviously. Writing was another 15,000 years away. It had to be relearned, rediscovered, or reinvented by nearly every isolated population on Earth over and over in Africa, Asia, and eventually the Americas. Which raises an uncomfortable question. How many humans died before someone, somewhere, figured out that fire was doing more than just warming food? And boiling still had a limit. It worked on a river. It didn't work in a desert where there was no river to begin with. That's the problem that pushed early humans to do something far more radical than treating water. They started building machines to find it. In the Negev desert, archaeologists have mapped an extraordinary network of ancient wells and cisterns built by Nabatean engineers starting around the 4th century BCE. But the real engineering marvel predates them. At sites across the Sahara, then a green lake-dotted landscape roughly 10,000 years ago, researchers led by archaeologist Savino de Lernia found human-dug wells over 5 meters deep, hand-excavated with nothing but stone tools and, presumably, desperation. 5 meters is not a hole. It's a controlled descent into rock and sediment, dug blind with no guarantee water was even down there. And when the Sahara fully dried around 5,000 years ago, populations didn't just adapt, they engineered around extinction. The Nabateans eventually built cisterns capable of holding thousands of liters, plastered with a waterproof lime coating that modern chemists have analyzed and found nearly identical in composition to Roman concrete additives developed 1,000 years later, independently. That's not folklore. That's controlled environment hydraulic engineering, done by people with no metal tools, no written formulas, and no margin for error. But here's where it gets stranger still. Some of the most sophisticated water systems weren't built by large empires at all. In Petra, Jordan, the Nabateans, a population estimated at only around 20,000 to 30,000 people, constructed a water distribution system of channels, dams, and terracotta pipes so precise that modern hydrologists studying the site in the 1990s found the ancient pipe gradients were engineered to prevent both stagnation and erosion at the same time. A single miscalculation in slope, and the entire city's water source fails. A civilization smaller than a modern town solved a plumbing problem cities today still struggle with. Every one of these solutions, the fermentation at Raqefet, the boiling in Xianrendong, the wells beneath the Sahara, the pipes of Petra, came from the same starting point. Not knowledge, not chemistry. Trial, death, and repetition across thousands of generations until the survivors' habits became the species' habits. You turn a handle now, water comes out. Clear, cold, tested by machines you'll never see, treated by processes standardized in the early 20th century, after John Snow traced a London cholera outbreak to a single contaminated pump in 1854. But the instinct underneath that convenience is not new. It's not even yours, individually. It's inherited. Every time you hesitate before drinking from an unfamiliar source, a stream, a well, water with an odd smell, you're not being paranoid. You're running a calculation that kept your ancestors alive for 300,000 years before anyone ever explained why it worked.